The United States is stepping up its military presence in the Middle East. More than 20 warships have been deployed to the region. CENTCOM just released this video of some of those ships and aircraft in close formation in the Arabian Sea just last week.
That's right. One of those ships, the USS Abraham Lincoln, is now setting a record for most consecutive days at sea, with its last reported stop in Guam in December. Look, the Navy is busy, to say the least, really busy, operating in several theaters, the Mideast, the Caribbean, Indo-Pacific, and more. And that's where we started our conversation with America's highest-ranking naval officer, Admiral Daryl Caudle, Chief of Naval Operations.
It is challenging, and one of the things I've worked on since coming in as the CNO is trying to actually, to the extent I can, tailor the forces that we provide our different combatant commanders globally to make sure I'm not stretched too thin. And so, of course, there's a lot of ships, 20-plus warships and auxiliaries in the Middle East. We're down in Venezuela doing humanitarian assistance there. We're conducting the Rim of the Pacific.
Do you need more boats? Do you have the vessels that you need? How many of the ones that you have are updated or you think need updating in the next 5-10 years?
Well, we have a congressional requirement for 355 warships. I teeter around 300 because my current decommissioning rate, it matches my build rate.
Okay.
So I never changed the overall size of the Navy. So one of the big initiatives with the president's current budget is to really energize shipbuilding in our country, to try to get us up to that number we are required to have. I do need a bigger Navy. There is a lot going on, and Navy's got a lot of responsibility.
I wanted to ask you that because on the civilian side, America doesn't really build ships anymore like it used to. I mean, commercial shipbuilding in the U.S. In 2022, the U.S. built just 5 ocean-going commercial ships. China built over 1,700, and South Korea built over 700. And the U.S. Navy currently estimates that China's shipbuilding capacity is 232 times our own. It costs twice as much to build a ship in the U.S. as it does elsewhere. Is that a national security concern?
Absolutely is. You know, like so many things that's happened in the U.S. as we've become a more service-oriented country, we outsource so much. And one of the things we made a decision on as a country at some point is to outsource commercial shipbuilding. And we're trying to reel that back a bit and get that back started again because it is a national security issue.
Talk to me about the Trump battleship, because there's a lot of questions and analysis in Congress about these Trump-class battleships. A lot of people are saying it's a vanity project. There's all these, I think, fairly untested things, this rail gun, this laser something. I don't know, maybe you can explain it to me. How do you convince Congress and lawmakers that you do need a class of warships? And would it be helpful to change the name of it? Do you think that would make it a little bit easier to get through congressional appropriations?
Well, I try not to get too wrapped around that part of it.
Fair enough.
I mean, he is the president, but the need for the large surface combatant has never been more pressing. When we move our carriers, which are nuclear powered around the world, I say we can be anywhere in 2 weeks. I'm usually limited in that transit overall speed by my inability to move as a composite force. And so,
what do you mean by that?
Well, what I'm having to do is refuel the destroyers, which are gas powered, gas turbine powered. A very capable ship, but not nuclear. And so I need a large surface combatant, number one, that's nuclear powered. And we're really pressing to make this nuclear powered battleship to be that. Number two is I need more payload volume. So the battleship will be 4 times the payload volume of a destroyer, with about 2 times the crew size. So if you can imagine the firepower of 4 destroyers with only twice the crew of 1 destroyer, that's a fairly good economy of scale there. There is some new technology on it, but we have to push forward on some new tech. I mean, that's what we do. I got my master's at the Naval Postgraduate School in the early 90s, and I did it all on directed energy and lasers. And we have not, really evolved that to the point that we could. If I can get high-powered lasers on board my ships, then the defensive weapons I carry today can be shifted to that, and then I get more payload volume for offensive weapons. It's extremely important we press with directed energy.
As you're talking about being able to have bigger ships with fewer crew, less crew, how's the Navy doing right now? I know you've got a lot of ships way past their original deployment dates. Are you worried about force depletion? Are your sailors and officers getting exhausted?
I am worried about it. I press very hard that we stick to our deployment timelines. It's important for us to do our normal rotations because overall, it's actually in the aggregate deliver more force like that. But sometimes the world gets a vote, and when I'm in conflict, I've got to keep them there. Our sailors rise to that occasion, but it does take a toll on the ships.
Yeah. They've got to come in for maintenance too, right?
They got to come in for maintenance. It's hard on families. They're missing events they were planning on, thought their sailor was going to be back for sure. It extends maintenance periods a bit. You know, when they come back, there's some thumb rules that we use on the extent that that happens. We go through more repair parts, but the Navy is responsible for doing what it does. And so, you know, what we see out of that, which is a little bit contrary to popular belief, is record reenlistments and retention.
I was just going to ask if it impacted retention and recruitment, but
it does in a very positive way. And so, you know, these sailors join to see the world, to be combatants, to live in the profession of arms, and it's very important that they get to do what they do. Part of why we have had record recruiting and brought in 45,000 sailors this year, 3 months ahead, making goal, is because of three things, I think. Number one is mission. They love our mission. Okay. Number two, they want to serve. Okay. And so, and we just, that's part of that mission package. We have really invested in our recruiters to make them high end and train them properly. A little bit of a playbook from the Marine Corps, who's always, I think, done that perhaps better.
They did have very good commercials when I was growing up.
Yes, they do, and we're trying to follow suit on that. And then just the amount of attention the administration pays to recruiting and backing, you know, making it so important to have a strong military has played a positive role.
But does the administration listen to you when you say we are too many places at once, we need to make some decisions here?
Well, the way that's done, the way I voice that is through the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he carries my water on that very effectively. And so those things that are concerning to me as a service chief, like readiness and families and extended deployments and the things that does, all that's conveyed. And we make recommendations on that, and we try to rotate our force, sustain our force, and do all those things. And at the end of the day, the greatest compliment we can get as a Navy is to be needed and to be utilized. And so we rise to that occasion. The
U.S. has used approximately half its pre-war inventory for key precision strike missiles and Patriots in the conflict in Iran. Manufacturing a Tomahawk or some of these bigger munitions takes about 4 years. U.S. intelligence analysts estimate an extremely high likelihood that China is going to try to take action against Taiwan by the year 2027. Is this impacting readiness? And is the current conflict in Iran making it harder for you to be ready for what could come, especially when it comes to security threats in the Indo-Pacific? I've never seen in my 41 years anything to be more singularly focused on shipbuilding and munitions production than we are right now. The Deputy Secretary of War, Feinberg, is running a Munitions Acceleration Council, and all the services are part of this. We're really investing in these companies. One of the things that's held us back from producing at the rates that we needed to is we call it single vendor lock. Yeah. You know, we were really held up by solid rocket motor production by one company. We've opened that space up to 3 companies now. Okay. We're trying to make longer contracts that, you know, Congress has not always been behind. They like shorter contracts. By extending that out, these companies are more likely to recapitalize and put more money into their own infrastructure, get the employees that they need, run multiple shifts, maybe borrow some money from the government or some of the strategic capital. But there's still going to be a lag. I mean, even if you cut that time in half, you're looking at a bare minimum of 2 or 3 years where you've got half the things to fire at the bad guy than you used to. That's right. Raytheon's a big, RTX is a big one for me. They own all my standard missiles, SM-2, 3, 6, and they own the torpedo that we shoot and TLAMs. And so they've gone to multiple shifts. They are now unconstrained by this, solid rocket motor where they're heavily investing. And I think you're going to see a knee in the curve on this, to where your proportions are not going to be just linearly affected. It's going to go high order through these investments, and we're going to get up on the step. But in this part of the curve, what do you do operationally? How do you compensate for that? Well, fortunately for the Middle East, for the Epic Fury, Navy munitions, we're in a pretty good place. For TLAMs, what we're able to do is some that we're going back in for their periodic recertification. We ended up shooting those, and so not tampering with the ones that were still in their normal life cycle of periodicity. And then we haven't had to, because the threats haven't required it, for me to shoot a lot of my standard missiles. Navy's in pretty good shape, and I think the Army, there's been a lot of, Patriots shot, but all of us are moving toward a lower size munition. You hear Coyote, which is essentially a Hellfire size missile. Roadrunner is another one like that, where we're actually matching better the threat of a one-way attack for $5,000 with a weapon that's more in line with that, and quite frankly, more capable to take that out. So our learning curve is very high on matching the threat to the missile system. That's going to give us the breathing room to get our big missiles back in inventory. So you're not worried about it? I'm not worried about it, no. Is the government contracting system broken?
I think historically one could assert with high confidence that, I would call it broken in a pejorative kind of way. It was never really good. And part of that is, contracting strategies are hard when you're near monopolistic type environments where you don't have a lot of competition. So part of the administration's effort in the Secretary of the Navy's all over this, and the Secretary of War as well, is trying to figure out how to build more competition. That has to come through incentivizing more players to get into it in the U.S., of course, and that's the idea, is to do that in the United States. But I think one of the catalysts to do that is working with foreign partners.
Really?
And so to open
that doesn't concern you? We just talked about the lack of U.S. industrial base.
Well, I actually sometimes had to have some Field of Dreams models in place to actually get this done.
Okay.
You'll hear, sometimes colloquially hear about the Finland model of how we're doing icebreakers for the Coast Guard. So, kind of to build a couple there, teach our workforce how to do it, get the supply chain healthy, and then move that production line to the U.S. That's pretty appealing to me, actually. And because I have a lot of shipbuilders, but they need the breathing room to get the industrial changes they're doing with technology, robotics, and artificial intelligence, recapitalization, and all the things that they're putting into their workforce to develop them. And it gives me some breathing room to get those things working while I'm actually delivering the ships we talked about earlier.